Well, and my father participated in politics, and in fact, for Bill Laughlin in Fremont, and in Fowle, and in Jim Wells County, Brooks County, and basically got his job in the school district. And then that drove him to go back, and they helped him through the political system. He helped the political bosses get out the vote, and that's how he became a teacher. So this whole structure, instead of, as you said, the plantation boss thing, it was more likened to you get a job with the school district. Was that the way it was in Robstown?
Well, pretty much the patron system is the famous cases, of course, George Parr here and other individuals. But basically what it is, you have a boss, and back then he was a white political boss, what you Caucasian boss. We called him the gringo political jefe. You know, I mean, he liked to be called that too, but every community had one. And basically he was the big dog, you know, but at the same time he had a humanitarian type of institution that he would use his resources.
Philanthropic dictatorship, right? Benevolent dictator.
Well, humanitarian gestures, you know.
Throw him a bone.
You know, throw him a bone. You know, your son needs some money to pay his medical bills. We're here, you need some gravel in your yard.
We'll throw it out. Yeah.
You know,
remember who to vote for.
But the reciprocal system was pretty much in place, and it was basically taxpayers' resources for the most part that were used in this exchange.
Exploited for barter.
Yeah. But despite that, I saw a defeatist psychology among certain populations.
What do you mean?
I started to see that my dad had given in pretty much to this. I didn't understand at that time that pretty much the system could not be altered so radically, you know, so he pretty much adapted to the times. But times have changed. Hispanics have grown in numbers. There's more educated now. Back then you had very few educated Hispanics. Now we got lawyers, doctors, professionals, a whole middle class that has exploded in all these communities. And but at the same time, we're still struggling with the collective identity part. Who are we? You know, every day. Where do we belong? Mm-hmm. So you start to see Hispanics that pretty much because they want to move up the ladder, you start to see some certain individuals that have become more harming agents to their community than helping agents.
Well, see, that's what I take exception to. We have somebody, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I don't forget where I come from. I don't forget my roots because I saw racism right up hand. African Americans think they had problems. We had problems too. And we got buried at the King Ranch. We got killed. We got our lands taken away. Yeah. And now they want to bring up this Arizona thing, and I won't let that happen. I won't let that happen as long as I have a breath that I can draw in my lungs. Because, I mean, that's in our soul. And then we have these guys that want to move up the ladder, and I say to them, keep scrubbing. It's never going to come off. You're Hispanic. They want to identify with Republicans and white extremists, and they want to be that. Nothing wrong with being a Republican and believing in that. My wife's a Republican, but and it makes a great marriage. Southern Baptist Republican, Mexican American Democrat, you know. But what I'm saying is, I see that they become negative agents, and they identify with the whites so much that they have such self-loathing that they forget about being Hispanic. And I always say, keep scrubbing. It'll never come off.
You know, but I also see that in the Democratic Party. Remember, this patron
we
system.
Got some haters in the Democratic Party.
The patron system here in South Texas was associated with the Democratic Party. It's something to be intellectually honest.
Let's be intellectually honest.
You know, intellectually honest is the pretty much back then there was a single party that dominated this area.
There were no Republicans.
And no Republicans. You had conservative Democrats and liberal Democrats pretty much. A few moderates, right. Those that were moving up the ladder. But the psychology of the people that feel dominated, this is something I was struggling with. And that's why El Defensor was born.
Amen.
Because I was watching Zorro one day, and here were the masses of California people that felt dominated by these groups that were
and they were
very powerful.
There.
Yeah. But and they pretty much were very submissive to the power structure, which was overwhelming in there. And all of a sudden, this guy named Zorro shows up.
A
And they say,
Mexican guy, can you believe it? A Mexican
well,
leader?
you know,
I mean, you know.
but they a Messiah, you know, somebody that's going to save us.
Exactly.
But I realized that nobody's going to save you.
You got to save yourself.
You know, every community has to step up. It has its leaders. It has its resources. So I said, how can I communicate this point? How do you destroy, or how do you, you don't destroy it completely, but how do you alter to some degree the oppressed mind? And I said, well, El Defensor will be a mystical hero. So that's why it started as an underground newspaper. They said, who's this guy? You know, I had just come back to my community. I had a sister in Boston that said, well, come down here, Homer, you can attend Harvard, you can do this and that. And, you know, she made a lot of money in the real estate market.
Is this your sister, the physicist?
You know, she gives to the Harvard Fund and all this stuff. And I said, no, my corazón, you know, my heart is in South Texas. I want to come back to my community where I have a brain drain and give something back. I had my cousin, Bishop Raimundo Peña, which is one of the first bishops from this area, Catholic bishops, in charge of one of the largest dioceses in Corpus. We had him as Archbishop of Texas, first Hispanic ever, appointed interim for a while before Flores. And then he moved to Brownsville, one of the largest dioceses. Recently, he just retired. But here I grew up in a traditionally Catholic community.
Strongly Catholic.
But I saw too much fatalism. And El Defensor was a response to that. I said, how can I empower people? Well, I created El Defensor, which means to defend, which was really them. Yes. I would go after the activists and say, look, a defender in our community. Look at what he's doing. Look at the power of how he's changing lives.
So anyone can be a defensor.
You know, so really it wasn't me. It wasn't Homero Villarreal, El Defensor. My ego, I try to put it with a little e. I kept my name out of the paper initially. Some people were saying, well, he's afraid to write his name. No, I ain't put my name because I felt that people had to search inside themselves as to who we really are. We're trying to answer a question. Who are we? You know?
And you know, you bring up an interesting point. Like, I run political campaigns. First couple of things, and the man remains nameless, but there were others. They come up to me and said, okay, you were helping these candidates, okay, and we won all 3 elections, and I'm very happy about that. And you also were a great part of it, also giving us a media voice. But, you know, they came up to you and said, well, who's backing you? In other words, that fatalism that because I'm a Hispanic male attorney, but nonetheless, I can't run campaigns. We need this great white father from Austin or Dallas who knows nothing about our communities, who come in here and rape the candidates of 50 grand, and then they leave and put together some commercials. And we said, Real Simple Productions, Joe Flores, people like Homero Villarreal, people that have other shows, Hector Gonzalez, Carlos Lopez, the Lopez family. We have our own resources right here. It's just what you're saying, Homero. We don't need this great higher power to come in and tell us how to run our county, tell us how to run our elections, and tell us how to, you know, govern.
And you know, the patron system really, what it did was really break the spirit of the people. I mean, that was something that I was looking at. I was no psychologist, I was no analyst, but I had to become, to a certain degree. I've read literature every day trying to understand this collective sense of despondency in our community where people had just given up.
Yes.
I searched from the conservative literature, to the radical literature of Karl Marx. Even Karl Marx had a word for it. He called them. Remember, Karl Marx was trying to encourage the working class to rise against the rich, the bourgeoisie.
Proletariats against the bourgeois.
But he said at the very bottom, even below the working class, you have something called the lumpons, proletariat. And I said, who are they? He said, they're just people that don't care. They just given up. And that's what I was looking at. People that just had given up. That system has been in it. He said the people that you're going to activate are actually the people that have good jobs, that are trying to move up the ladder.
But there's a
certain, there's a certain level that had just given up.